At 20,000 feet over Southampton, Flight Lieutenant James Nicholson already knew how this would end. He had seen it happen too many times to count. The Messerschmitt Bf-109 ahead of him broke cleanly away from its bomber escort, sunlight flashing off its wings as it turned south. Nicholson shoved the Hurricane's throttle fully forward. The Merlin engine screamed in protest, every vibration telegraphing the same brutal truth. This was all it had. For perhaps 30 seconds, hope existed. Then the German pilot glanced back. The Bf-109 surged ahead. 50 yards. 100. 200. Nicholson's airspeed needle sat pinned at 290 miles per hour. Maximum, absolute maximum. The Messerschmitt was doing well over 320. The gap widened with mathematical certainty. Another enemy fighter escaped untouched. This was not bad luck. This was routine. Throughout the summer of 1940, Hurricane pilots climbed into their cockpits knowing a simple fact. If a Bf-109 chose not to fight, they could not stop it. The numbers were unforgiving. At operational altitude, the Bf-109E could reach roughly 340 miles per hour. A Hurricane Mk struggled to exceed 315 on its very best day. That 25-mile-per-hour deficit handed German pilots total control. They attacked when they wished, and vanished when they pleased. Combat reports from July and August read like variations of the same lament. Close to range but could not gain. Enemy dived away, unable to follow. It was not a failure of skill or courage. Hurricane pilots were well trained and aggressive. Their aircraft simply could not close the distance. The Spitfire performed better, but Fighter Command had fewer than 300 serviceable machines at the height of the crisis. Hurricanes numbered nearly twice that. They bore the weight of the battle, and would ultimately destroy more enemy aircraft than any other defense. But in those critical weeks, they were being asked to do the impossible: win a stern chase against a faster fighter. The consequences were deadly, even when no one was shot down. German pilots executed diving attacks, fired a burst, then escaped vertically or horizontally before Hurricanes could respond. British squadrons fought reactively, trapped in a defensive cycle. By mid-August, morale was fraying. Pilots whispered that they were flying obsolete machines into a modern war. Everyone knew the problem. The squadrons knew it. The Air Ministry knew it. The men at Farnborough knew it. The Hurricane was too slow. And yet the solution sat in plain sight. Every ground crewman passed it daily on the dispersal hardstandings. The massive three-bladed constant-speed propeller, 11 feet across, spinning at over 2,000 revolutions per minute. It was a superb piece of engineering, automatically adjusting blade angle to keep the Merlin within its limits. It also carried a hidden flaw. The de Havilland constant speed unit used hydraulic pitch control, fine pitch for takeoff and climb, coarse pitch for high-speed flight. But inside the hub were physical stops, pins and collars that prevented the blades from rotating beyond a conservative maximum angle. Those limits had been set in 1938, during peacetime testing, when safety margins mattered more than combat survival. Engineering officers understood the trade-off perfectly. Finer pitch meant acceleration and climb. Coarser pitch meant speed. Like bicycle gearing, you could not have both at once. The Hurricane's propeller was effectively stuck in a gear too low for pursuit at altitude. Flight sergeants began doing quiet calculations, on cigarette packets, in crew rooms, after midnight. Increase the course pitch stop by just a few degrees and propeller drag would fall sharply. 10 miles per hour, maybe more. Enough to change everything. It was also completely forbidden. Air Ministry regulations banned unauthorized modifications outright. Any change to engine or propeller settings required months of testing and formal approval. Violations could lead to court-martial, loss of rank, even prison. The risks were real: overstress, vibration, catastrophic failure. And so nothing happened. Until it couldn't not happen. Sometime after midnight on August 22, 1940, at Martlesham Heath, Flight Sergeant James Fitter made his decision. He had just watched another shaken pilot return with the same story, close enough to see the enemy's markings, powerless to catch him. The pilot was barely 20. Fitter took a toolbox and a torch and walked out to Hurricane L-1842. The modification was simple, if you knew the system. Spinner off. Hub exposed. Inside, a small metal stop pin limiting blade angle to about 23 degrees. Fitter removed it, filed roughly 3 mm from the pin, and reassembled the unit with meticulous care. Total time, 47 minutes. At dawn, the test flight climbed to 15,000 feet. Full throttle. The airspeed needle crept past 300, 310, 320, and settled near 328 miles per hour. No vibration. Normal temperatures. 12 miles per hour faster. That night, 6 more Hurricanes were quietly modified. 2 days later, a Bf-109 tried to run from a Hurricane over the North Sea, and failed. To understand why such a tiny change mattered so much, you have to understand what a propeller blade truly is. Not a paddle, but a rotating wing. Its angle to the airflow governs thrust and drag. Fine pitch takes big bites of air, and creates enormous resistance. Coarse pitch slices cleanly through it, trading climb for speed. By filing down one small piece of metal, those ground crews had shifted the Hurricane into a higher gear. And that is where this story truly begins. The propeller never stopped producing thrust. It simply began doing so more intelligently. The difference was subtle but decisive, like the contrast between digging a canoe forward with short, powerful strokes versus gliding ahead with long, efficient ones. Both move you forward. Only one lets you reach real speed. By shifting to a flatter blade angle at high velocity, the Hurricane's propeller reduced drag without sacrificing engine control. The aircraft was not working harder. It was wasting less energy. That was the brilliance of the constant speed propeller. Hurricanes and Spitfires carried one of the most advanced systems of the era. A hydraulic governor that sensed engine RPM and automatically adjusted blade pitch to keep revolutions constant. Climbing, it moved toward fine pitch to prevent over-revving. Diving, it shifted toward coarse pitch to avoid windmilling. The pilot didn't manage it, the system did. But it could only operate within the hard mechanical limits imposed by its stop pins. And those limits had been set conservatively in 1938. De Havilland's engineers had designed a propeller for long service life in a peacetime air force, not for pilots fighting for survival who needed every extra mile per hour immediately. By moving the maximum coarse pitch stop just a few degrees, Flight Sergeant Fitter hadn't broken the system. He'd freed it. The governor still functioned exactly as intended. It simply had access to a more efficient blade angle for high-speed flight. The knowledge spread the way forbidden knowledge always does in the military. Quietly, selectively, and face-to-face. A chance meeting at a fuel bowser. A conversation over tea. Your Hurricanes seem to be staying with Jerry longer. A pause. We made a small adjustment. Another pause. How small? By early September 1940, at least 9 Hurricane squadrons had modified their propellers without authorization. The work was done at night or before dawn, when fewer eyes were watching. Only the most trusted fitters were involved. The mechanical task took under an hour. The fear of discovery lasted much longer. This was not a regulatory gray area. It was a clear violation. If Air Ministry inspectors measured blade angles against official specifications, the evidence would be undeniable. So ground crews built an informal warning network. Inspections were rarely a surprise if you knew the right people. When word spread, modified hubs were quietly reverted to factory settings for a day or two. Inspectors arrived, ticked boxes, and left. The real configuration returned that same night. Pilots were fully aware of what had been done, and why. Combat reports were written with care. No one mentioned exact speeds. Instead, phrases appeared like maintained contact during extended pursuit. Squadron commanders understood perfectly. They could see the results: fewer fruitless chases, more successful engagements. Officially acknowledging the changes meant stopping them, or court-martialing their own men. Most chose silence, so long as aircraft weren't failing and pilots were coming home. There were close calls. At one station, An Air Ministry technical officer arrived unannounced to investigate engine vibrations. He examined propeller hubs while a flight sergeant watched from a distance, calculating escape routes and consequences. The officer never measured the pitch stops. He left satisfied. The flight sergeant finished his cigarette with shaking hands and went back to work. By late August, the operational impact was unmistakable. Flying Officer Eric Mars reported a 4-minute full-throttle pursuit of a Bf-109, an eternity compared to July, when contact was usually lost in 90 seconds. On August 30th, one squadron claimed 3 Bf-109s destroyed in stern chases. Another day later, 2 more German fighters were caught trying to escape after diving attacks. The Luftwaffe noticed. Intercepted German reports complained that British fighters were displaying improved speed during disengagement. They suspected engine upgrades or new aircraft variants. They were wrong about the cause, but not the effect. One engagement over Canterbury made the point unmistakable. A Hurricane stayed glued to a Bf-109 through dives, turns, and shallow climbs, maneuvers that should have guaranteed escape. The German fighter never made the channel. When the pilot returned, his ground crew said nothing. They already knew why. Through September, the pattern hardened. Squadrons with modified aircraft claimed more kills during pursuit. Units flying factory-spec Hurricanes continued reporting escapes. Replacement aircraft arriving from maintenance depots were immediately identified as slower, and quietly corrected the same night. No one asked questions. Everyone understood the risk. The secret lasted until October 12, 1940. That morning, Wing Commander Thomas Prickman from the Directorate of Technical Development arrived for what was meant to be a routine inspection. Prickman had spent years at de Havilland. He knew propellers. When his protractor showed 26 degrees of coarse pitch, 3 degrees beyond specification, he checked another aircraft. Then another. All the same. He summoned the squadron flight sergeant and asked a single question. Who authorized this modification? The answer was honest. No one did. Within days, Air Ministry inspectors fanned out across fighter command. Of 14 squadrons examined, 11 carried modified propellers. Between 200 and 300 aircraft had been altered without approval, testing, or documentation. The scale of the violation was staggering. 4 days, flight sergeants across fighter command waited for punishment. They knew the investigation's scope. They knew the regulations. Courts-martial should have been inevitable. Instead, on October 16, 1940, Air Vice Marshal Trafford Leigh-Mallory received the report and paused. Rather than demand discipline, he asked for data. Leigh-Mallory ordered a comparison of Hurricane Squadron combat performance from July through October, separating units with modified propellers from those still flying to factory specification. The results were impossible to ignore. Squadrons with altered pitch stops showed a 37% higher success rate in engagements requiring pursuit of Bf-109s. More telling still, there were 0 propeller or reduction gear failures attributable to the modification. The figures went straight to Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding. Dowding had little patience for theory divorced from results. He had just fought, and narrowly won, the largest air battle in history with aircraft that had been technically outmatched. Hurricanes had carried the burden of that fight. Now the evidence showed that ground crews, acting without permission, had removed a critical disadvantage without breaking a single aircraft. The decision was straightforward. On October 23, 1940, the Air Ministry issued Order A.743, formally authorizing revised propeller pitch stops on all Hurricane Mki aircraft fitted with de Havilland or Rotol constant speed units. The technical instructions were precise and uncannily familiar to anyone who had filed stop pins by torchlight in August. The order made no reference to the unauthorized work that had forced the issue. That history disappeared into classified files. Flight Sergeant James Fitter received a commendation for exceptional technical initiative contributing to improved aircraft performance. He was never officially told that his illegal modification had reshaped policy, but when he read the specifications, he recognized his own measurements immediately. Others received similar acknowledgments. No one faced a court-martial. The full explanation emerged only after the war. In 1946, Royal Aircraft Establishment engineer Dennis Bristow analyzed wartime propeller performance using both combat data and de Havilland's original 1938 design calculations. What he found was quietly embarrassing. The factory pitch limits had been based on correct mathematics applied to the wrong conditions. Stress calculations assumed sea-level air density, even though hurricanes fought at altitude, where air density was roughly 30% lower. That meant the aerodynamic loads on the propeller blades were far less severe than the designers had assumed. The original engineers had been cautious, as peacetime demanded. But that caution became excessive once the aircraft entered combat. The blades, hubs, and reduction gears had ample safety margin. The flight sergeants hadn't exceeded the propeller's real limits. They had simply gone beyond limits that were artificially conservative. Bristow's report concluded, with dry understatement, that wartime field modifications had corrected excessive design margins. In plain terms, the ground crews had been right. There was more. The increased course pitch angle didn't just reduce drag, it improved efficiency at altitude by lowering blade angle of attack, reducing turbulence and wasted energy. The modified propellers converted engine power into thrust more effectively than the original specification allowed. De Havilland acknowledged the findings. Quietly, the company revised pitch stop standards for future aircraft. Post-war fighters like the Tempest and Sea Fury used pitch ranges that would have been considered reckless in 1938. The irony was unavoidable. The RAF had nearly punished the men who fixed a critical flaw, not through recklessness, but through experience. The modification did not win the Battle of Britain on its own. Radar, pilots, leadership, and German errors all mattered. But margins matter too. 12 miles per hour was the difference between escape and destruction, between frustration and confidence. Once Luftwaffe pilots realized hurricanes could stay with them, their behavior changed. Attacks were broken off earlier. Aggression declined. Initiative slipped away. And that mattered. The most important lesson was not technical. It was organizational. Innovation came from the bottom up, from flight sergeants watching pilots return day after day knowing something was wrong. Regulations existed for good reasons. But in 1940, the RAF proved flexible enough to recognize when rules were costing lives. By November, when the modification became official, the battle had already turned. Daylight air superiority had slipped beyond German reach. The forbidden change became routine, then forgotten. But for a few critical weeks in the summer of 1940, it was illegal, dangerous, and absolutely necessary.